I switch on the battered receiver, and the static crackles like distant gunfire. The signal wavers, but one thing is clear: the world has been hollowed out. Dawn no longer brings a golden glow. It bleeds in from the horizon like an infection. The sky, once a vast dome of blue, now glares back at me in shades of ash and ember. It's as though the heavens themselves are perpetually aflame. And every sunrise reminds us how far we've fallen. Beneath this toxic canopy, the land lies broken. The rivers that once carved life into every valley have shrunk to fissures in the earth, yawning chasms of cracked clay. I remember when you could drink from any stream without fear. Now there are no streams, only poison-slick puddles that lure desperate souls closer, only to deliver fever and delirium. Fields of grain have long since turned to dust dunes. The wind carries more than sand. It carries shards of memory, fragments of children's laughter, the rattling of traffic, the hum of a crowded marketplace, all echoes swallowed by time. The skeletons of cities stand as mute sentinels to our hubris. Skyscrapers lean at impossible angles, their glass facades shattered into a million glittering teeth. Street lamps dangle, swinging on frayed wires like broken juries, no longer judges of the night. I scavenged one such avenue yesterday, picking through overturned cars and rusted vending machines. The air tasted of metal and death. Every step crunched underfoot, as if I were walking on human bones. Acid rain still falls intermittently, scouring the land in waves of pain. When it hits, the world hisses. I retreat into the remnants of an underground parking garage, where the concrete walls offer scant shelter. Water drips from the ceiling in oily beads, pooling into miniature black lakes. Outside, weeds fight through cracks, white flowers resilient against all odds. In their stubborn bloom, I catch a glimmer of defiance. This apocalypse wasn't born overnight. The weather tore itself apart slowly. A relentless march of heat waves, storms that grew teeth. Winters so bitter they cracked bone. Wildfires consumed forests that took centuries to grow. Hurricanes ripped coastlines into ragged scars. And through it all, governments fractured. The United Nations dissolved under the weight of famine, drought, and civil war. National armies fell into disarray. Soldiers turned to banditry or simply vanished. Now there are no borders, only zones of abandonment. Once bustling highways stretch mile after mile without a living soul in sight, save for the occasional scavenger caravan. I've learned to avoid them. Raiders travel these stretches in stolen military trucks, their skull-painted flags snapping. The wind, they patrol the ruins for radios, batteries, clean water, anything that can be traded or hoarded. Here and there, survivor enclaves endure, huddled around generators and murky cisterns. I pass one such settlement, 15 weary faces staring out from behind makeshift barricades. Their eyes glint with suspicion as I raise my hands in peace. They've seen too many ghosts wearing human skin. I give them only a nod and keep moving. Their desperation is a mirror. I can't afford to linger in its reflection. Institutions, what's left are myths. The old world's universities decay in ivy-choked courtyards. Hospitals stand silent, their operating rooms scaffolds of tangled V-lines and overturned gurneys. In daylight, silhouettes of mannequins hang in glass storefronts, forever waiting for customers who will never return. Yet even here, raw survival demands routine. Every morning I climb to the roof of this skeletal block and scan the horizon. Through binoculars, I map out storms, track the spiraling clouds of psychic static that sweep the planet. Storms that twist the mind, leave you hearing voices in the wind. When they arrive, the radiation pulses in your bones, and you pray your mind holds fast. I've watched whole communities fall silent under those skies. In the distance, jagged mountains stand resolute, their peaks crowned with snow that never melts. They are unreachable sanctuaries, legends whispered around flickering lanterns. Some say a valley there still flows with clear water, fed by a hidden glacier. Others insist it's a trap, a natural labyrinth where the lost disappear forever. Between these extremes, desolation and whispered hope, I walk the fine line of existence. My boots sink into powdery ash, and every breath feels borrowed. Yet, I carry with me a single luxury, this battered radio. Its dial jumps between frequencies, but somewhere out there a voice endures. Sometimes it's just static. Sometimes it's an old folk song, a crackling hymn of remembrance. And once in, a rare while, it's another survivor, broadcasting a greeting, a tip on clean water, or simply a human hello. This is what's left of civilization, fragments of sound drifting across poisoned airwaves, a desperate Morse code of souls refusing to vanish without a trace. And so I describe what I see, what I feel, because if I don't record it, then perhaps it never happened. Perhaps the world's final breath will be swallowed by the same silence we sought to conquer. Here, at the edge of oblivion, I wait for the next storm, and with it, the next message. I turn the crank on the generator and listen to the soft whir before I open the hatch to the rooftop. Above me, the sky glares a relentless ochre. No hint of blue remains, not even at dawn. The air is thick with suspended ash, like a fog that tastes of metal and memory. Every breath feels like inhaling the world's regrets. Below, the city is a graveyard of monuments to humanity's arrogance. Skyscrapers lean at odd angles, their steel spines exposed like rib cages picked clean. The streets are rivers of dust, drifting in ghostly eddies that swirl around overturned cars and fractured sidewalks. I walk across a collapsed overpass. Its concrete pocked with bullet holes and stained by tire tracks that lead nowhere. Once, this was a highway jammed with commuters. Now it's a wind tunnel, carrying the whispers of loss. Rain no longer falls, in gentle sheets. When it comes, it is acid fire hissing against rooftops and eating away paint, plastic, flesh. I learned early to dart from cover when the first sour drops patter down. Now, I carry a canister of neutralizing compound, a gift from a wandering scientist who vanished into the wasteland months ago. I spray it across metal surfaces to buy them a few precious weeks of resistance. The river that once cut through the city's heart is gone. In its place, a wide gash of cracked earth split by jagged shards of dry mud. At sunrise, the canyon glows red, as if the earth itself is bleeding. Vultures wheel overhead on thermal currents, their cries punctuating the heavy silence. I remember a time when I used to sit by that riverbank, dangling my feet in the cool water. I remember laughter, summer festivals, fish jumping against the current. Those memories burn hotter than this irradiated sun. Outside the urban sprawl, the forests have withered to brittle skeletons. Wildfires consumed them in a fury that eclipsed any natural blaze. The few patches of green that remain cling to oases where underground springs still trickle. I've risked ambushes from raiders to reach one such spring, hidden beneath the roots of an ancient oak. The water tastes like hope, sharp and pure, a fleeting reminder of what the world once promised. Crops lie in ruin across the plains. Fields of wheat have turned to ash. Orchards stand with blackened trunks, fruitless and barren. We planted new seeds in hopes of revival, but the soil betrayed us, salted by relentless drought and washed away by flash floods when the sky finally cracked. For months afterward, we sifted sand for shards of corn, trying to coax life from the dust. Most nights the wind carried the faint rustle of metals from miles away, the clang of scavengers dismantling irrigation pumps, hunting for copper valves and power lines. What remains of civilization clings together in small, fortified pockets. I've passed 3 settlements today alone, each barbed-wired compound housing no more than a dozen souls. Their fences are lined, with solar panels scavenged from ruined rooftops, and their guards patrol with makeshift weapons. Crossbows strung from fishing line, shotguns bristling with homemade buckshot. They trade water filtration tablets for medical supplies and stories of far-off lands where the sky might yet clear. I sell them salvaged radio parts in exchange for food. They call my broadcasts the last ember of humanity. I wonder if that ember will smolder, or whether the wind will snuff it out. Rogue factions roam the territory between enclaves. Some call themselves the Iron Hand, raiders in patched-together armor who enforce a brutal code. Take what you need, pay what you owe, or die. Others are cults, worshipping the storms themselves as gods come to punish or redeem us. I've glimpsed their ceremonies through my scanner. Hooded figures dancing in electric blue lightning, chanting in tongues I once studied in seminary school. They believe the storms will cleanse the earth, wash away our sins in torrents of psychic energy. I believe they will only leave us empty shells, minds shattered by the static. Institutions have crumbled into legend. Universities are now weeds, choking lecture halls. Libraries are collapsed roofs and soggy tomes unread for years. Hospitals stand silent, their corridors obstructed by gurneys and spilled medicine. In one operating room, I found an intact cache of antibiotics, blue vials, like forgotten jewels. I rationed them carefully, using them only when infection threatens to finish what the world has already begun. The government fell in stages. First the federal oversight, then state authorities, then local councils dissolved under the weight of famine and flood. Now the closest thing to law is whoever holds the strongest weapon or controls the nearest water source. I've learned to avoid the checkpoints. They question newcomers for days, testing loyalty with demands for blood or barter. I flash my radio ID and they let me pass, muttering about the voice from the static, as though I were more myth than flesh. At night, the psychic storms roll in from the west. They appear as roiling violet clouds, edged with electric filaments that dance like specters. My Geiger counter clicks in sync with the tremors in my skull. For hours I hear voices, whispers, relatives long gone, cries for help, faint music from radios long dead. I shut down all electronics, wrap myself in earthen blankets and wait for the surge to pass. When it does, the world seems emptier than before. This is the setting into which I was born, and will, perhaps, one day, die. A world reduced to its rawest. Elements, dust, fire, water too precious to waste, and the fragile human will to endure. Each day brings new uncertainty. Will the storms intensify? Will another enclave fall? Will the hidden valley of clear water be more than a rumor? I cannot say. All I know is this. I breathe ash, I drink hope, and I speak into the void, hoping someone, anyone, is still listening. My name is Jonah Reyes. Used to be a sound engineer. Audio restoration, voice preservation, frequency stabilization. Stuff nobody thought much about until it all started to fall apart. Now, I'm a different kind of technician, a scavenger of broken signals, a voice among ghosts. I broadcast from what's left of a weather station perched on the edge of a fractured canyon in what used to be Colorado. Up here, the elevation buys me some time. Air's thinner, storms come slower, and the interference isn't as violent. Yet every morning begins the same. I pump the generator by hand, muscles aching, lungs raw from the dust. I tap out a test transmission, check for incoming frequencies. 99 times out of 100, there's nothing. Just static, layered, like sediment. Old news reports, emergency alerts, desperate messages that bounce endlessly off collapsed satellites. But sometimes there's a voice. Cracked, hollow, barely intelligible, a survivor, a plea, a location. I write them down in a journal, charcoal on paper because power is too precious for digital waste. This station used to be a relay. Hub, weather monitoring equipment stacked floor to ceiling. Now it's stripped to the essentials. A solar array patched with scrap. A makeshift antenna array, the transmitter, and me. The walls are reinforced with scrap metal and insulation peeled from abandoned vehicles. There's a cot, a battery bank, a shortwave set with more duct tape than wires, and in the center, the mic, the voice, my voice. People call me the radio man, if they call me anything at all. There's not much left of society, but word still travels. Scattered enclaves tune into my nightly broadcasts, a ritual that's more prayer than transmission. They say it helps them sleep, hearing someone else talk about the sky. Some say it keeps them sane. Maybe it's just easier to hear despair filtered through someone else's throat. But I don't do it for them. Not entirely. I do it for her. For Elena, my wife. She was a biologist, environmental genomics. She believed we could fix this right until the end. I remember her hunched over her workstation even as the floods overtook the lab, trying to culture drought-resistant rootstock while the soil outside turned to poison. She tried to stay, tried to adapt. When the second wave of firestorms came, she didn't make it out. They told me her body shielded the seed vault. Some of the samples were saved. That's the kind of person she was. Even in death, she gave something back. The day I lost her, I stopped being a man and became a purpose. At first, I didn't want to go on. I spent weeks wandering the wreckage, half mad from thirst and grief, drinking from irradiated puddles, whispering to ghosts. I found the station by accident. Just a locked metal door in the rocks, almost missed it. Inside, it was cool, quiet. It felt like the first breath after nearly drowning. I fixed what I could, rewired what I couldn't, and made it speak. It was the only thing I had left to hold on to. Now, the broadcast is my ritual. I read weather patterns, what little the sensors still pick up. I share survivor coordinates when I intercept them. I log psychic storm surges, warn travelers about hostile zones, and sometimes, just sometimes, I tell stories. Not many people do that anymore, but stories are like water. When the world dries out, they mean more than anything. They remind us we existed, that we mattered, that maybe somewhere, someone still hears us. What drives me? It isn't just hope. Hope is a cruel currency in a place like this. No, it's memory, duty, and something deeper, something primal. The need to connect, to transmit across the silence, to prove we haven't all been erased. I've lost more than just Elena. My brother, Thomas. He was taken in one of the early raids back when we thought things could still be fixed through cooperation. He was organizing water rationing plans for the community center near Denver. They tied him to a post and left him there, a warning to others who tried to share too much. I buried what was left of him in frozen ground beneath a rusted swing set. The laughter that once echoed there still haunts me when the wind cuts through. I don't talk about them often, those I've lost. But they live in the airwaves. Each time I hit that mic, their names sit on the edge of my tongue. Survival isn't glamorous. It's scavenging desiccated food packets from collapsed vending machines, boiling questionable water through carbon sand filters, and praying the storms don't short out the last bit of solar charge. It's wrapping your boots in duct tape, because there's no more rubber, and hoping the mutated insects in the lower valleys haven't spread north yet. It's bartering old batteries for freeze-dried protein at checkpoint markets run by mercenaries who no longer believe in anything except firepower and silence. Sometimes I think about leaving the station, heading east. There are rumors of a zone with functioning infrastructure. Some say the old satellite array in Maine still has signal. Others say the whole coast was swallowed by storms. Either way, it's days of travel through open country, rogue faction territory, and storm paths. I haven't decided, but I've packed a go bag just in case. Half of me thinks I'll never use it. The other half already knows I will. I'm not a hero, I'm not brave, I'm tired, I'm angry, but I'm not done. That's the difference. Every night before I sign off, I say one thing. Just one line I've repeated since the first day I turned the transmitter on. If you're listening, you're not alone. We're still out here, and the sky hasn't taken us all yet. Some days, that's a lie, but most days I still believe it. Just enough to keep going. Just enough to speak into the silence again. Because in the end, maybe that's all. Any of us are. Voices carried through static, searching for another voice that still knows how to answer. I've tracked these storms for months. Psychic fronts that ripple across the atmosphere like bruises, churning ions and tearing at the neural cortex. The instruments here register them as spikes in electromagnetic flux, readings that would have sent any pre-collapse meteorologist into a frenzy. Now there are death knell. These aren't ordinary tempests. They're supercharged by atmospheric instability. The jet stream has fractured into meandering currents, driven by polar ice melt and unparalleled temperature gradients. Sunlight penetrates the thin ozone in searing beams, heating land and sea unevenly. As warm air collides with cooler bands, it releases pent-up energy in the form of hypercharged electrical storms. But unlike the old lightning shows, these storms carry intense psychic radiation, high-frequency ionization that seeps into bone and brain. Every time I hear the static surge on my radio gear, I know it's coming. My heart thumps in sync with the Geiger clicks. A single bolt can fry electronics. Instruments go dead, antennas arc, batteries surge, and humans pay the price too. I've seen entire enclaves go silent overnight. Radios and minds alike shut down. Even between storms, the sky shows no mercy. Rainfall has dropped to almost zero for 3 years straight. The last gauged precipitation was a fluke, acidic and laced with heavy metals courtesy of airborne volcanic ash we can't scrub out. The Missouri River, I once charted as a climate scientist, is now a network of briny puddles, each one evaporating under an unrelenting sun. Water tables have collapsed. Aquifers we drilled centuries ago are bone dry, their porous layers depleted by overuse and toxic infiltration. I pump from a well that still yields trickles, but the arsenic concentration is so high, I can taste it, bitter and metallic. I run every drop through charcoal and reverse osmosis filters, but each cycle costs energy I can ill afford. Resource scarcity has birthed a new economy of violence. Raider gangs, like the Iron Hand and the Storm Cult, converge on the few remaining water points, clashing with scavengers and enclaves. Each firefight can raise miles of landscape. Scorch patterns map out their roots in the dust. When gunpowder runs low, they resort to corrosive chemicals stolen from abandoned factories, chlorine gas and nerve agents, because why not break the will of your enemy with invisible terror? Crops have failed everywhere. Soil pH levels have swung toward alkalinity as salt fronts creep inland from dried-up seabeds. When we planted hardy barley strains, we got only brittle stalks that cracked under the slightest breeze. Our greenhouses require power to recycle water and regulate heat. When the generators die, the plants shrivel like candle wicks. I've heard of an enclave in Idaho that managed to harvest mushrooms in underground bunkers, feeding on composted biomass. It's ingenious, but it feeds only a few dozen, if you can get past the radioactive spores. I ration my supplies to the hour. Each day's allotment, 1.2 liters of filtered water, 200 calories of hydroponic algae paste, and exactly 5 amp hours of battery power. That power runs the transmitter, my lifeline, and the sensors that warn of incoming storms. Nothing else. My solar panels are patched with sleep pad graphite from old satellites. They generate only 30 watts at peak noon. My wind turbine, jury-rigged from a ceiling fan and scavenged PVC blades, collapses if wind speeds exceed 20 miles per hour. A genuine gale, those I record on my anemometer as apocalypse mode, scores the hillsides with particulates that erode bearings and tear wires free. When a storm is imminent, I have exactly 20 minutes to secure the station. I park a steel plate against the antenna, seal every vent, disconnect the batteries, and wrap the console in Faraday cloth salvaged from an underground military depot. Then I send out the alert on emergency channel 12.34 MHz. Psychic storm. Front approaching. Time to impact, 20 minutes. Secure all electronics, seek shelter, repeat. Here's what's happening up there. Imagine the polar vortex untethered, its cold core spilling into mid-latitudes. Warm, moist air from the hay. Tropics collides with that core, generating a supercell of charged particles. Cosmic rays, once screened by a healthy magnetosphere, now seep in as Earth's magnetic field buckles under solar winds. The result is an electromagnetic maelstrom that resonates at frequencies harmful to organic neural networks. To survive, use conductive mesh, chicken wire, salvaged foil, to enclose sensitive electronics. Ground it to a metal rod buried at least 2 feet deep. Wrap your radio gear and batteries in multiple layers of conductive cloth or aluminum foil. Boil collected. Water to remove pathogens. Then filter through activated charcoal from burnt wood to absorb heavy metals. Use solar stills during clear days. Black painted sheet, clear plastic dome, collection trough, Evaporation and condensation yield nearly pure water. A simple Geiger-Miller. Dewey, I scavenged mine from an old mining detector, can warn of elevated ionizing radiation that accompanies these storms. Limit time in exposed areas when counts exceed 500 USVHR. Resting underground or within reinforced shelters can reduce exposure by 80%. Earthing. Connect yourself physically to metal that's grounded below the frost line. I wrap a copper wire around my wrist, clip it to a rebar spike in the soil. It doesn't just protect electronics, it helps drain excess neural charge. Insulation. Wear layered fabrics, cotton wool, then a metallic inner layer, foil-lined blanket. To stabilize body's electromagnetic field, use the station's modified LiDAR sensor. I've repurposed drone optics to scan for hidden vapor. Seeps. Underground water sources that still leak moisture in arid zones. Mark potential caches when radiation levels are low. Avoid plateaus that amplify ground currents during storms. Every month, storms grow stronger. The sensors record a 12% increase in peak electromagnetic intensity compared to the same season last year. That's exponential growth, a trend no climate model predicted. I've watched my own DNA markers shift on home-built PCR assays. Micronuclei formation in blood cells. Clear signs of chronic radiation exposure. If this continues, we'll face neurological degeneration generations before food runs out. And food will run out, if it hasn't already. My algae paste can't sustain a full-time diet. I supplement with protein bars scavenged from convoy wrecks, each one a relic of a world that thought 5,000 calories per person per day was generous. Now 200 calories is a luxury. I dream of fresh vegetables and real meat, but those dreams are chemical illusions induced by the storms themselves. Beyond the numbers, beyond the science, there's human cost. Yesterday, I intercepted a transmission from a group of 5 travelers stranded 10 miles north. They begged for coordinates to the Blue Spring, a rumored oasis. They said they'd die of thirst by sundown. I sent them my best approximation. Coordinates, derived from satellite maps downloaded before the collapse. I haven't heard back. The static is all that answers me. I can't keep this up forever. Each broadcast drains my last reserves. Each storm damages my gear irreparably. The station walls grow brittle under acid rain. My joints ache from radiation, arthritis. But I cling to one possibility. When I reverse engineer the storm patterns, when I chart the next safe window, I might reach that enclave in Maine, if it exists. Until then, I send my warnings, my advice, my shaky voice into the static. Because even if survival is impossible, someone somewhere deserves a fighting chance. And perhaps buried beneath the chaos there's a spark of order, a sliver of sanctuary that will let us rebuild. Survival is harder by the day. But this is the crisis, and these are the rules. Learn them, share them. And pray the next psychic front doesn't bring the world's final silence. I'm waking before dawn now. The pre-dawn sky a bruise of orange and gray. My water reserves hover at 18 liters, just enough to last 9 days if I ration strictly. But that doesn't account for the leaks in my bladder pack, or the evaporation from the open cistern I use to catch dew. My algae paste ration is down to 12 packets. The batteries click over the last few amp hours as I power the transmitter each morning, the only thing still tethering me to hope. Yesterday, I scavenged the ruins of an old gas station 10 miles west. The pumps were stripped, hoses torn away. Someone had beaten me there. I found a single barrel half full of diesel, sloshing in its corroded shell. It took 3 days to siphon it into my jerry cans using salvaged tubing. 3 days of sniper eyes watching from the broken canopy. 3 nights of firefights broken only by the rumble of distant storms. I lost 2 cans when the plastic cracked in the cold. Now I have just enough to run the generator through the next 7 psychic storms. My food stores are worse. The algae paste is barely palatable. A chalky slime that coats my tongue and dulls my memories with each bite. I keep 2 protein bars for emergency, but I haven't dared open them. They're more precious than water. 3 nights ago they came. Raiders in patched military fatigues, faces painted in chipping neon green. They called themselves the Reckoning, apparently because they believe they're here to judge the weak. They circled the station on foot, flashlights tracing the reinforced walls, laughter slicing through the static hisses on the radio. They shot the wind turbine just as I was closing the hatch. A single bullet through the PVC blade, enough to unbalance the rotor and tear the generator mount. Sparks flew. My heart sank. A malfunctioned turbine means no auxiliary power and more strain on the solar panels. I ducked into the Faraday cage, watching through a cracked side panel as their leader, a woman with a steel tooth, circled the station and spat, "Your voice is worthless out here." I opened the microphone and called out, to them, to anyone listening. "This is Jonah Reyes. Leave now. You have what you came for." Silence. Then a cackle of amusement. They lit flares, 3 red bursts against the starless sky, and left as quietly as they'd come, trading the stolen blade for a case of canned peaches. I later found their tracks leading northwest toward the riverbed, probably trading peaches for ammunition. 2 days ago, I intercepted a weak transmission, a hoarse female voice, calling herself Mara. She said she had coordinates to an abandoned water treatment plant outside Fort Collins, untouched, sealed before the collapse. She sounded credible, desperate. I hoped she was real. I mounted my pack, slung the rifle across my back, and set out before first light. The journey was brutal. Acid rain had chewed through my jacket sleeves. My gaiters, remnants of a mountaineer's kit, were shredded by the thorns of mutated brush. I covered 20 miles in 2 days, following scrap marker arrows painted on rocks by other travelers. Some pointed forward, others looped back on themselves, a sign of panic or trickery. On the second night, I spotted a flicker of light in the canyon below. A small camp, 6 souls around a fire. I crept closer, rifle ready, praying they were allies. As I drew near, voices hushed. A man held up a lantern. I froze. "Jonah Reyes?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. "We've heard you on the air." I lowered the rifle. They were survivors from Denver, techs, medics, engineers, 15 of them in total, aching out a settlement in caves beneath the foothills. They called their community Ember Hollow. They'd scavenged solar panels and wind turbines like me, rigged a hydroponic bay in a collapsed mall atrium, and even had a working radio relayer. They wanted me to join them, to bring my station under their network, to coordinate broadcasts, and share resources. For a moment, I let hope bloom. A real community, connection, maybe even progress. But the leader, a former environmental lawyer named Titus, said the plant outside Fort Collins was too far, too dangerous. "Not worth the cost," he said. "We have enough water if we recycle, if we ration." And here I was chasing a rumor. I clenched my jaw. Their security protocols were tight, no outsiders, no risky scavenging, which meant I had a choice: stay in relative safety with Ember Hollow or press on for the plant. The plant might hold tens of thousands of liters. It might be our last real chance, or it could be a trap. I declined their offer. "I'll stay in touch," I whispered, though I doubted I'd contact them again. I wished Titus and his people well. They seemed genuine. But my sense of duty, to Elena, to the lost, to the countless voices in the static, pulled me onward, on. My third morning out from Ember Hollow, the air fell silent, an eerie lull before the psychic storm's onslaught. I checked the portable anemometer. 0 wind. The barometer plummeted. I felt it in my bones, the familiar tingle of electromagnetic overload. I scrambled to erect a makeshift Faraday shelter, using the frame of my collapsed tent and a tarp lined with aluminum foil. As the sky darkened, I huddled inside, heart pounding. The storm hit without warning. A crack like a cathedral bell, then the sky lit up in jagged purple streaks. My Geiger ticked faster than a Death Watch beetle. My field recorder left outside, fizzed and died. The air vibrated with low-frequency hums. If I opened my mouth, I could taste the charge. I crawled out at pitch black. The ground was littered with dead birds, their eyes glazed, mouths agape. I wish I could say they were the only casualties. My own vision blurred, long static trails lingering in the darkness. I pressed on, phasing through dizziness and auditory hallucinations. Voices of friends long gone telling me to turn back, to rest. Each step felt like wading through molasses, every breath a sear in my lungs. At dawn, I found the plant. A hulking, concrete structure, its intake valves sealed by welded steel plates. A "Do Not Trespass" sign hung crooked, a warning written before the collapse. My heart hammered. This was it. I've never been so terrified. The plant's doors were locked. From the inside, no tracks in the ash. Inside, the light from my headlamp revealed control panels coated in dust, gauges frozen at 0. But one thing caught my eye. A flicker of movement on the water tank's interior walkway. A silhouette. Smoke curled from a secondary chimney. Someone's been here. Someone opened the plant, scavenged power, perhaps even tapped into the reservoir. Either that, or they were setting a trap. I broke a window, slipped inside, and found wet footprints leading down a catwalk. The reservoir was still half full, enough water for a small army. But the pumps lay dead, flooded with brine. Whoever took refuge here must know how to repair them. Whoever they are, they hold the key to survival. I didn't get a chance to investigate. Further, a squad of reckoning raiders emerged from the darkness, their torches swinging. They'd followed me, found me, and now they wanted what I'd found. My pulse raced. I ducked behind a control console, raised the rifle. The reckoning leader stepped into view, steel-tooth neon paint, and barked at her crew. They aimed shotgun, barrels at the tank valves, prying them open. I had two choices: engage and risk the plant collapsing under crossfire, or retreat and warn Ember Hollow that someone else might beat them to this treasure. I chose to retreat. I slipped back into the tunnel, sealing the door with a chunk of rebar. My boots echoed as I ran across the old filter bays, the hiss of acid etching concrete walls. Behind me, the plant's alarms, solar-powered sirens, that had somehow reactivated, screeched like banshees in the gloom. I burst out into the dawn, lungs burning, eyes stinging. I mapped my escape route by memory. A ravine leading to a plateau where I could call for Ember Hollow on the emergency channel. But the plateau had been washed out in last summer's flash floods. Now it was a jagged ridge of scree and mud. I climbed. I felt the first warning tingle of another storm. My hands shook. If I didn't find help soon, I'd lose the plant, and perhaps my own mind, to the reckoning, to the storms, to the creeping starvation. On that ridge, I paused. The wind bit through my jacket. I thought of Elena's face, brave, earnest, always looking for solutions. I thought of Thomas in his pinned uniform, organizing water lines for innocent children. I thought of the voices I'd gathered on the airwaves, some real, some delusional, all human. Was I chasing a myth or a miracle? Could Amber Hollow's skill set revive the plant? Could I trust Titus's engineers to keep it, share it, and not let it become a new chokehold? Or was I fooling myself, convinced that any solution must come from me alone? The storm front advanced, a violet wall on my horizon. My radio crackled with static and a voice, faint but unmistakable. Jonah Reyes, do not come further. It's a trap, it was Mara's voice, the same one that guided me here. She knew the plant, she warned me away. But why? Was she one of the reckoning, calling me into an ambush? Or was she genuinely trying to protect me? The ridge was narrow. One slip meant a plunge into the canyon floor. My heart pounded. I felt the weight of every decision I'd ever made. Staying on the air, refusing Ember Hollow's sanctuary, trusting Mara's coordinates. Storm lightning flickered over the plant behind me. The lake of water glowed in that flash. A promise and a danger. I wrestled the transmitter to my lips and whispered, "This is Jonah. Ember Hollow, if you read me, return. I have proof. The plant is real. Bring help. Quickly." Silence answered. The wind tore at my words. The ridge groaned, under the violet bombardment. And then those words, Mara's warning, echoed again. Do not come further. You will die. I closed my eyes, breathing ash and fear. My journal lay at my waist, filled with data, coordinates, and warnings. I could turn back, report that the plant was lost. I could try to contact Mara, find out who she really was. Or I could press on, knife edge between salvation and death. The storm's first tendrils of static tore into my eardrums. The rock beneath me trembled. I took a single step toward the plant. One chance. One choice. One moment that would change everything. If I lived. Because that's the rising action. The point where every thread of hope, every shard of fear, coalesces into one decision that defines whether we survive or vanish in this psychic storm-swept world. And for Jonah Reyes, that moment has come. Now it's time to see if the myth of salvation is real, or if it's just another lie carried on the wind. I step off the ridge just as the purple wash of midnight storm surges across the sky. A jagged horizon of electric wrath. The ground beneath me quakes and I stumble toward the concrete maw of the plant. Rain spitting acid before the true onslaught arrives. Every breath tears at my lungs. This isn't just weather, it's war. Inside, the air is thick with the stench of brine and rust. My headlamp's beam slices through the gloom, illuminating the massive reservoir tank, its surface rippling in the tremors. The welded doors I'd barred the raiders with are now bent wide, crushed by their crowbars. Fresh footprints in the mud trail toward the control room. Someone's beaten me here. I taste fear on my tongue as I follow the tracks, rifle raised. The valves are open. Water spills in tremulous arcs onto the grated floor. This is no accidental. Breach, they knew exactly what they were after. Pumps lie silent, wiring torn. Behind me, the siren's final wail dies in the wet shadows. A single figure emerges from the darkness. A woman with haunted eyes, half shielded by a scarf stained with diesel and ash. She's young, thinner than she should be. She holds a rusted wrench like a weapon. Jonah Reyes, she croaks. You came alone. Her voice is Mara's, proof that the radio signal wasn't a trap, but a summons. Relief and suspicion war within me. Why reopen the plant? I ask, lowering the rifle. Why risk the reckoning? She steps closer, boots clanking on metal grates. We're the last engineers left. Ember Hollow needs this water. We can't survive another season of storms. She jerks her head toward a companion kneeling by a bank of shattered circuit boards. But we can't get the pumps running. We need your skills and the power from your station. I swallow. This is the moment I waited for. Proof that the myth of salvation was real. Yet around me lies the wreckage of my own hope. A system I can restore or watch die. Outside, the storm's first thunderclap rattles the tank. I can feel the psychic charge building in my teeth. The reckoning will be back, I warn. They'll want to take everything. Mara's eyes flick to the valve she's pried half open. We'll fight them if we must. But right now, help. Bring this water to life. I kneel beside the pumps. The wiring schematic reminds me of Elena's lab diagrams. Cross-hatched circuits, flow charts of fluid dynamics. My hands move with muscle memory as I reconnect broken leads. Solder wires with a portable torch. Jury-rig a voltage regulator from scrap parts. Each spark is a prayer, a plea to the world that life still means something. Above, the thunders. Cadence grows frantic. The psychic storm is cresting. I press my palm against the metal hull, feeling the electromagnetic hum buzz through my veins. I remember Elena's words. Use the earth as your conductor. Let the ground carry away the charge. I tear a strip of foil from my backpack, twist it into a coil, and jam it under the pump's chassis, clamping the other end to a rebar rod driven deep into the wet soil below. Ground it! I shout to Mara. She throws me a lead, and together, we complete the circuit. The pump shudders, first a wheeze, then a low growl. Water sluices into the intake, hiss of hydraulic relief echoing down the corridor. The reckoning's return is heralded by gunfire. A staccato barrage against the outer doors. Splintered wood and metal groan as they batter their way in. I grip the wrench like a baton. Mara raises a makeshift spear, but I can't fight them. All. Not with these hands wet and shaking. I lock eyes with Mara, and in that moment I see not a stranger but the promise Elena died for. The chance to preserve life, to build something greater than survival. I step forward, wrench raised. "We're not your prey," I yelp. "We have water, we have power. Take what you need, just leave us enough to save Ember Hollow." Their leader steps into the dim light, a painted skull visage beneath a tattered hood. She sizes me up, blood-red shotgun leveled at my chest. Then she tilts her head and nods. A moment of silent calculation passes, pregnant with violence. Finally, she lowers her weapon. "One for them, one for us," she mutters. Her crew fans out, snapping up jerry cans and crates. They don't touch the pumps. They don't confiscate the water. They leave with what they consider fair spoils. When their boots fade down the corridor, my knees buckle. Mara catches me, eyes wide. I sit on the pump housing and run my fingers through my hair, feeling the slick of rain and the grit of failure. "Why didn't they kill us?" I rasp. Mara kneels beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Even they know the water belongs to everyone. Even monsters understand thirst." I close my eyes, the wail of the storm seeping through the walls. My heartbeat matches its pulse. In the deafening roar, I hear the final verdict: survive or be silenced. I rise, battered but unbroken. The pumps are humming now, water flooding through pipes into storage cisterns beyond. I trace my finger along a drip line, a single bead of clear liquid that glints in the flashlight's beam. And in that bead, I see Elena's face. Hopeful, determined. A blast of lightning fractures the sky, illuminating the reservoir in stark relief. I step onto the catwalk and watch sunlight, amber and golden despite the storm, break through clouds for the first time since I don't know when. The water dances in the flash, a promise reborn. But the storm isn't done. Another roar, deeper and more savage. I press my hands against the railings, bracing as the plant shudders. Pipes groan under the sudden pressure surge. I realize we've overdriven the pumps. If I don't release some of the stored pressure, the whole system will blow. I race to the emergency release valve, lungs burning, ears ringing. I remember Titus warning me about rushing decisions. How one error could drown the plant in backwash or send a flash flood down valley corridors. But moments of crisis demand moments of courage. I wrench the valve open. A geyser of water sprays into a containment trench, steam hissing as it meets metal panels. The system stabilizes. The humming slows to a steady drone. I lean against a control panel slick with rain and sweat. My legs tremble, but I'm alive. The plant is alive. Mara joins me, breathing ragged. "We'll get this to Ember Hollow," she says. "We'll survive." I nod, voice cracking. Elena would have known how to fix it without a hitch. My chest tightens, but I had to learn. She reaches out, gripping my hand. "You learned the hardest lesson of all, to trust others, even in the darkest storm." Outside, the psychic surge peaks, then abruptly ebbs. The lights overhead flicker back to life, fluorescent tubes buzzing, powered by turbines still turning in spite of acid rain. I stand in the control room, hands on the console, and speak into the static. "Attention, Ember Hollow. This is Jonah Reyes. The Fort Collins plant is secure. Water is flowing. Coordinates repeated. 45853 degree N, 105.0844 degree W. Bring your convoy. And hurry. Another storm is building, but this time we have a chance." The relay crackles in reply. A chorus of voices I recognize. Titus, Mara, engineers and medics from Ember Hollow, all converging in that triumphant moment. I exhale, the weight of every choice lifting. The storm still rages beyond these walls, but here, within the heartbeat of this machine, we've carved out a sanctuary. The turning point isn't the water itself, nor the pumps, nor even the defeat of the reckoning. It's the moment I embraced my vulnerability, my need for others, and found that hope isn't a solitary ember. It's a fire we build together. And as the first convoy's headlights appear in the distance, cutting through the haze like beacons, I understand. This is where the story truly begins. The crisis has reached its apex, but from here, with water and will, we will shape a new world. The first light after the storm was almost gentle. I stepped out onto the plant's catwalk and watched the convoy roll in. Half a dozen armored trucks from Ember Hollow, carrying engineers, medics, and enough plastic jerry cans to fill every cistern. They cheered when I waved, faces streaked with ash, but alight with something I hadn't seen in years: relief. Within 24 hours, the Fort Collins plant was humming at full capacity. Solar arrays, wind turbines, even the salvaged micro-hydro unit in the sediment basin fed clean power to the filtration pumps. Ember Hollow's engineers rewired the distribution network, tapping into downstream villages that had long since surrendered to thirst. By the second day, water ran clear through miles of rebuilt pipe, gurgling from community spigots and bursting through makeshift irrigation lines. Fields that had lain dormant for seasons drank greedily of that life-giving flow. The reckoning never returned. Word must have spread that the plant was no mere watering hole, but a fortified sanctuary defended by ally and enemy alike. Their absence was a reminder that even in collapse, the rules sometimes hold. Those who understand true need respect it. Standing amid the hum of machinery and the laughter of children splashing in newly filled troughs, I felt an unexpected surge of hope, fragile like a sapling in burned soil, but alive. For the first time, I understood that survival wasn't just staving off death. It was building something worth living for. Ember Hollow's leader, Titus, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You've given us our future." I nodded, but I knew I'd only lit the match. They would tend the flame. In the weeks that followed, my broadcasts changed. No longer did I speak only of imminent storms and tacit warnings. I told stories of the plant's rebirth, shared interviews with Ember Hollow's hydroponic farmers, and even read poetry sent in from orphaned children who now use the cisterns as swimming pools. Each new segment felt like reclamation of voice, of community, of the world we hope to salvage. But I remained haunted by the price paid. I thought of Mara and her small band of engineers, some of whom didn't survive the initial repairs. I thought of the reckoning's victims, those who fled too late or fought for a drop that might have saved them. And I thought, always, of Elena, how she would have thrown herself into this work with fervor, finding solutions amid chaos. When I walk the plant floors now, I sometimes imagine her at my side, adjusting valves or jotting notes on her tattered clipboard. I've learned that leadership is a burden as well as a gift. Decisions still come hard. How much water to send west, when to ration for another front of storms, whom to admit into the growing network of enclaves. Trust isn't easy. Ember Hollow's council debates each request like a jury weighing life and death. I support them, but I don't envy their task. Signs of healing are tentative. Downstream wetlands that had become salt flats now show green at the edges. A few fish wriggle in newly oxygenated pools. Migratory birds dip their wings in the restored flow. Yet the psychic storms still roll in, though our new lightning arresters and grounded conduits deflect much of the worst. Acid rain falls less often, but the air remains thick with ash from distant wildfires, still raging in the northern forests. Climate balance is a long game. A single plant won't reverse millennia of damage. I know that. But every liter of water we reclaim, every kernel of barley we coax from the soil is a step away from oblivion. Each one reminds me that collapse is not a single event but a process, and so, perhaps, is recovery. I am no longer just the radio man. I am a liaison between enclaves, a chronicler of our fragile renaissance. My journal brims with data on storm, patterns, water quality, and distribution networks, but also with sketches of faces, fragments of song, and lines of verse. I've begun mentoring Mara's protege, a wiry technician named Silas, teaching him to read both circuits and psychic. Surges. When I see him kneeling by a pump, soldering with the same fierce concentration Elena once showed under her microscope, I believe we'll outlast the storms. I still wake before dawn to crank the generator and test the shortwave set. I still record each meteorological blip, each tremor in the earth. But now I file those reports alongside updates on crop yields, on community births, on fish returning to restored streams. My tone is less urgent, but no less vigilant. I've seen what disappearance looks like. I won't let it claim us. The world remains dangerous. Raiders lurk beyond our guarded perimeters, forced back but never vanquished. Storms still crackle on the horizon, reminders that nature, once unleashed, cannot be tamed. But in every drop of water that slakes a child's thirst, in every green shoot pushing through once sterile soil, we find our answer. We're survivors, yes, but more than that, we are gardeners of the future. We plant seeds of community alongside seeds of barley. We share hard-won knowledge of shielding and grounding with anyone who listens. And I, Jonah Reyes, will continue to speak into the static, chronicling our small victories and sounding the alarms when new threats arrive. When I sign off each night, I no longer say only, "You're not alone." I add, "We're building something new, together." Because the aftermath of our turning point is not merely the absence of disaster, but the presence of purpose. And that purpose, fragile though it may be, is enough reason to keep breathing, to keep fighting, and to keep dreaming of a world one day healed. I stand once more at the mouth of the plant's intake basin, watching water flow over the grates, in a steady, reassuring hum. The early morning light, pale gold through a thinning haze, dances on ripples that once lay silent and still. For a moment I close my eyes and let the sound fill me. 50 liters per minute, 50 lives per minute. A small victory echoing in the ruins, but hope is fragile. I feel it tremble beneath my ribs like a wounded bird. The psychic storms still loom on the horizon, black swirls edged in violet. The reckoning stirs in the distance, carving out new pockets of violence wherever water runs free. Drought still claims acres of farmland beyond the plant's reach. Wildfires rage in the north, sending ash clouds that choke our turbines. Every day brings a new crisis. A busted pump, a tainted cistern, a runaway convoy ambushed for its precious cargo. Yet here we are. Last week, Mars' team unearthed an old sedimentation tank hidden beneath the southwestern wing. It contained more than just sand and silt. It held early growth algae samples from pre-collapse research, cryogenically stored and cryoprotected. These strains, once activated, can thrive on brackish water and low light. We've started trials in Ember Hollow's greenhouse pods. If yields hold, we'll have a self-sustaining protein source in 6 weeks. 6 weeks. In a world where every sunrise is uncertain, 6 weeks of food security feels miraculous. It's a reminder that even in death, the old world offers gifts. Elena would have called it nature's stubborn ingenuity. I call it our second chance. We've begun drafting the Colorado Accord, a network treaty linking every enclave within a 200-mile radius. It stipulates protocols for water sharing, storm warnings, mutual defense, and technological exchange. It's tentative. Dozens of scribbled maps, charcoal signatures, empty seats at the negotiating table. But it's something. A blueprint for cooperation in a world that nearly forgot how to trust. My role has shifted. I'm no longer just the voice on the radio. I serve as liaison, archivist, and advisor. I transmit encrypted updates on storm trajectories, algal yields, and water table readings. I moderate disputes when a caravan demands more than its share. I mediate between Titus's engineers, who want to cannibalize old satellite dishes for better solar reception, and Ember Hollow's agronomists, who argue that every scrap of power belongs to the greenhouse. These tasks keep me tethered to reality. They remind me that survival isn't some linear path to utopia. It's a fractal of smaller decisions, each one shifting the pattern of our fragile world. Yesterday, I visited the new fish hatchery downriver, where a small school of trout, descendants of a strain introduced before the collapse, darted in, clear water. Children dangled their feet over the concrete ledge, shrieking when the fish brushed their toes. I felt an ache in my chest. Nostalgia, perhaps, or something deeper. The memory of my own childhood, of days spent fishing with my father on a real, untainted riverbank. I realized I haven't fished in years. Not because I'm too busy, but because I doubted fish could exist anywhere outside memory. Now, seeing those silver bodies weaving through sunlit currents, I felt something I almost forgot. The simplicity of joy. I've changed too. The man who scavenged for water, who hoarded batteries, who spoke only in dire warnings. He's still here, but with new purpose. I still wake before dawn, but now I watch the sunrise for color as much as for time. I still ration every drop, but I celebrate each cistern refill. I still carry a rifle, but only on supply runs. Here at the plant, I store it in the locker and pick up a wrench or a data pad instead. My journals are heavier these days, filled with schematics and treaties, but also lists of birthdays and wedding dates, small entries noting new life in rebuilt. Communities. I'm learning that survival is more than staying alive. It's kindness, imagination, and the courage to send seeds into the dust. Yet the world beyond the plant remains precarious. Satellite cells, once our eyes in the sky, are madly erratic, subject to the same storms that plague us below. I intercept their feeds when I can, but most days all I get is static. Without clear satellite data, we rely on ground reports, convoys, sending text bursts of coordinates, barometric readings, stormfront estimates. It works, but it's slow. Too slow when a storm can appear in minutes, and the storms grow stronger. Meteorological models, we've cobbled together simplified code. On salvaged servers, predict another wave next month, one of the worst yet. Triple pulse event, electromagnetic surge, acid downpour, and seismic tremors from induced tectonic stress. It could knock out the plant entirely if we're unprepared. So we prepare, reinforce pipes, stock extra filters, drill deeper grounding, do train shift crews and storm protocol, and I broadcast each precaution, each drill time, each contingency plan. My voice crackles through the static, but it no longer sounds like a lone echo. It carries the chorus of every hand that tightens a bolt, every eye that watches the sky, every soul holding on to hope. As the next crisis nears, I craft my nightly sign-off with deliberate care. I could warn of doom. I could remind everyone of what we stand to lose. But I choose to end each broadcast with this. We're still here. We've held the water, we've sown the algae, and we're building a network across the dust. No matter how fierce the storm, no matter how dark the night, remember, we rise together. Share water, share strength, and never let silence drown out our stories. Keep living, one breath, one drop, one sunrise at a time. Because that's the truth I carry. Despair is easy when the world is broken. But hope, we forge it from the hardest materials. Will, memory, and the conviction that tomorrow can be better if we make it so. I don't know what the next storm will bring. I don't know if the fish will survive, if the algae will yield, if the accord will hold. I don't know if I will. But I do know this. As long as we have water in our veins, stories on our lips, and hands to rebuild, we will endure. So tonight I sign off not with a promise of safety, but with a plea for persistence. Stay alive. Stay connected, and listen for each other in the static, because every voice counts, even in the psychic storm. And with that, I let the transmitter click off, the hum of the plant filling the silence. Outside, the wind picks up. The sky darkens. 200 miles of networked enclaves hold their breath. And in that fragile moment, between each pulse of thunder, I choose to believe we will greet another sunrise, together.